What's going on? It's Alec with the Living Near Athens team, and today I got Kasey Dean on the podcast. Kasey, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Glad to be here, sir.
Oh, dude, really, we're glad you're here. It's not every day we get somebody who's in the same field as us, working in media content creation. From what I understand, you work with individuals, businesses, helping them figure out how they want to be perceived and helping them be perceived.
Yeah, so our business right now is in realtor and real estate branding. What we're really interested in doing is taking agents and trying to help them build out a visible platform and a visible identity that really helps them stand out from the crowd.
Yeah. I mean, everybody's different, and they all got different personalities. What do you try to go for when you're meeting people? Do you try and talk to them and give them ideas for how they can start working their angle, or do they usually come to you with more fleshed out ideas?
So most of the time, one of the things that I think is that people are extremely interesting.
Yeah.
But a lot of times people aren't great at knowing why they're interesting. I think a lot of people are so well adjusted that a lot of times people aren't good at talking about themselves. And so what we really do and what we specialize in is sitting down, having a conversation with them, talking them through their backstory, and then helping them spin that into a compelling narrative that they can direct outward in the world to help people, to help their audience, to help the greater world remember who they are, what they do, and to remember their face for when they need a real estate agent in the future.
Right.
They've already got that story in their brain. So that's really where we focus.
Yeah, I mean, you want people to know you before they ever meet you, and telling stories is a great way to do it. It
is a great way to do it. I mean,
have you ever heard? What's a compelling story that you've heard recently from somebody that you've helped?
So one of the compelling stories that I've heard recently, sometimes agents have, a single larger backstory that they really want to focus on. Other agents have smaller, just small details about themselves. I've got a gentleman who works out of Milledgeville recently who, one of the things he wanted to emphasize was that he was Georgia's best dressed realtor. And it's a small detail, but that little bit of a branded detail really helps him stand out. He's an extremely well-dressed gentleman. You will never see him anywhere, grocery store, at a closing, wherever he is. He's always, buttoned all the way up, suit and tie. And it's a small detail to emphasize, but it really gives him a standout, it really gives him a standout presence that helps him, makes him memorable. Gives him
individuality.
There you go.
Yeah, we're all looking for it.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, one of the things that I really enjoy is there's a gentleman named Chris Doe that a lot of people call the father of branding.
In relation to James Doe?
I don't know James. How do you spell James Doe?
It was more like a CSI type thing.
Got you. John Doe.
John Doe, that's it.
So one of the things that Chris Doe says is that people ask, what is brand? And, people say, okay, it's not brand is not your logo, brand is not your colors, it's not your cute little tagline.
Right.
Brand is the gut level reaction that someone has to you, your face, or your company.
Yeah.
And one of the challenges that a lot of people have is that they don't have a brand, because a lot of times they're not willing to do anything that feels perhaps different enough or risky enough that they create that gut level impact. And so one of the things that we try to help people do, or we try to teach them, is that, to stand out, to have a brand. Everyone has a logo, everyone has a cute tagline, but not everyone has a memorable identity that really punches through that screen of...
Yeah.
The average person sees something like 10,000 advertisements every single day. And I don't think we realize that a lot of times.
Golly.
Is that, one of the challenges with that is no one thinks they're a telemarketer. No one thinks they're a spam box. No one thinks, that they're a pop-up ad when you're the one doing it.
Sure.
But what a lot of people don't realize, is if somebody's getting hit with 10,000 advertisements every single day, most of what we're putting out there, if your entire focus and your fixation is on just the standard, name, logo, business card.
Right.
You're ending up in that same spam box as anybody else.
Yeah. I mean, it's just an image being thrown at you. Mm-hmm. What you want is, folks to understand, perceive, and kind of comprehend what you're trying to put out there. I mean, you could even call it like a transfer of energy in ways.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
you're transferring, that's all sales is. I mean, you're transferring like your excitement and your ideas and your personality to them so that they can have a full-fledged idea of who you are, what you like.
Yeah, 100%. So would you say, talk to me a little bit more about that when you said, it's the transfer of energy. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if we're like talking about the idea of just general branding and how folks can show everybody who they are and what they're about, like there's obviously like a level of authenticity that has to be imparted. Whenever you're talking to anybody or showing off like an image or who you are and what you're about, you can certainly highlight the nice, pretty, good things, but you should also highlight like real, actual things about yourself, because we're all people, individuals, and I feel like folks have a great understanding of like authenticity and like how you're trying to be authentic with them.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that we try to teach people.
Yeah.
Is that I think a lot of times, people get fixated on wanting to have that really slick,
super crisp,
yeah,
overly produced.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we tell people a lot of times is people get fixated on having that slick public-facing identity. But the problem is that you can be so slick and so perfect that no one can hang on to you. It's kind of like having that bar of soap that if your identity, if your public-facing persona is so perfect, you slide right out of memory.
Yeah.
And so having that little bit of, that actual detail, that authenticity, that little bit of grit gives people away who are just being assaulted by images and advertisements. There's something genuine there for them to hang on to. And so that's what a lot of what we try to teach.
This is it's in the same idea of like, branding yourself as an individual. But like, one big thing I think about is if you look at any professional wrestling company, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're to talk about the WWE or AEW that's currently around, a big idea is having a face and a heel. A face would be somebody like John Cena. They're awesome. They give back to the community. They rock. They're nice to people. But they also serve that business still. They still put out a whooping or two. I mean, but they are perceived in such a way just because of how energetic they are, like their actions, like what they definitely put off a good public image like that. But you also have the heel dynamic, which is just as beloved in that crowd of people. And it's like a branding of, oh, I'm a tough, mean guy, and I'm going to totally smash your head, or like I'm totally going to drop you a power bomb on you,
Uh-huh.
It's very real. I mean, I've seen so many folks that'll do heel work, and they'll literally like yell at kids that are on the sideline. And, it's like, obviously you shouldn't go yell at kids, but for their purpose, holy smokes, talk about some good branding, dude. I mean, it plays into the story. They're telling that story,
Yeah.
I think a lot more people should at least post like more authentic stuff because everybody wants to see it, I mean, what we say we do in private and when we're going throughout our day, we say it. And like, if you're showing people that same stuff too, it adds a level of believability to you. It adds like that credibility to your image. I don't know. That's why I think it's a good blend of like nice content and like not nice content necessarily, like making it a little like grainy or, like washy in a way.
Yeah. One of the things that we talk a lot about with agents, or what we tell clients a lot of times, is that our goal is what we call impact. And, people get so fixated on the small details of, this is my headshot, this is my website. But the problem is that, you can spend a lot of money and not end up with anything that is impactful. Yeah. And when we talk about impact, how do you get somebody to stop scrolling? How do you tell them something that makes them memorable? How do you make them remember your face 5 minutes after they've clicked away from your page?
Right.
And so that's one of the things that we talk about is giving that little bit of a contrast. You want to prove, we think it's two-sided. Sure. One, you want to prove competency. You want to look like, you want to say, here's something I'm really good at. This is my job. This is my skill set. This is what I'm good at, and you can trust me with it.
Yeah.
But the other side of that is relatability. You need that dimension of relatability that people want to remember you. You need a little bit of your story. Here's your background. Here's my dog. Here's my family. Here's some of my hobbies. Here's me on, maybe carefully, here's me on one of my off days, just a little bit.
Yeah, seriously. Like, if you pick and choose, like, those battles where, like, for instance, you show, like, that you are just you're just like everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it really makes other people, I mean, because like you said, I really do agree. If like you try and make yourself seem like you're perfect online, there's no point. Mm-hmm. There's no point for the sheer fact that I have not, to this day, met a perfect person. I mean, you know, we all have faults in life and we all have our own struggles, and but that's something other people can relate to. Why do we watch movies like that? Why do we listen to sad music? Why do we listen, you know, to anything that talks about the human experience? And that's part of what, you know, you're trying to show people.
Yeah. Like you asked me a couple minutes ago about, you know, if I had any compelling stories or any agents that popped off.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite agents that I like to watch always, there's an agent in Atlanta named Vanessa, who works with is it okay to reference outside agents?
Yeah, okay, name drop them. We love to hear about them.
Okay, yeah. So like one of my favorite agents to watch out of Atlanta is Vanessa. She works with Domo Realty. She's the broker and an agent there.
Awesome.
But Vanessa has this really genius thing that she does, is that she puts out, you know, two different kinds of content. Her first kind of content is she has this kind of Stephen Colbert type personality where she's, you know, playing this she's making skits about this really being a really bad real estate agent who's trying really hard to act like a good real estate agent. And those go super viral. They bring her a huge amount of traffic. They get eyeballs in the door.
Yeah.
And so that gets her visibility. And then her very next post, she turns around and says, hey, this is how I took, you know, she puts on her business hat then. And she'll walk you through how she took a house that had been sitting on the market for, you know, 18 weeks or something like that, put her little bit of a touch on it, you know, did some staging, did some refurnishing and everything, and sold it above asking price 2 weeks later.
Right.
And it's the combination of those two things together. You know, she gives you that skit, she gives you that humor, she gives you that non-professional side to get eyeballs, to get traffic in the door, and then immediately turns around and, you know, shows you her professional side, her competency. And I think her ability to flip back and forth between those two things is really what makes her, you know, a special agent, at least in my eyes.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think that's like, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all a balancing point it's a balancing act when it comes to personal branding. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can't be so sterile, because that's just, you know, the big thing here. And I think this is probably one of the biggest things in all branding is like authenticity. You know what I mean? If you come off too sterile, you know, nobody's ever going to believe that. If you come off with too much, you know, folks won't think that you're a professional alone just based on some content. If you overproduce, you know, maybe like silly content, or maybe content that's not necessarily like up to snuff or doesn't really relate to the field you're trying to capture.
No, absolutely.
But either way, though, I mean, I think this is awesome. This is a great way for us to capture. I mean, we're content creators. I mean, how long have you been doing this now?
I have been making content for probably 8-9 years now.
Wow.
In different dimensions. You know, I was a YouTube kid, you know, that was out there making video essays on cartoons and stuff. And that's how I really learned to start making content.
Oh, really?
And then eventually, you know, I started shooting real estate photos, photography, and eventually just turned what I knew. It was a skill set that I developed on YouTube.
Yeah.
And then I realized that a lot of people were struggling. You know, I could see people putting out content. They were putting money. They were investing time in it. They were making it look nice, but they couldn't get the views. They couldn't get the visibility. They weren't getting a return on investment from it.
Right.
And so then I really was like, okay, so how do I take this skill set and deliver it to clients, you know, who specialize in real estate, but I get to give them that extra edge of saying, okay, now let me help you, you know, carve out a memorable identity.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where I came from.
That's really cool.
Oh, thanks.
Have you ever, I mean, let me ask you a question. Do you have like a zero to hero type of situation with any particular clients that, you know, you've taken from, I don't know, a couple of hundred views to maybe thousands upon thousands, or a few thousand at least?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, there are clients that we've seen who were struggling, you know, they only got a couple hundred views on something, and we've seen them hit, you know, thousands, 10,000s of views.
Yeah.
The biggest thing is that I think a lot of people don't realize how close they are to success with social media.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's not, you know, that they need to be somebody different, or they need to be fancier, or they need a higher end, more polished image. A lot of times they just need to make it faster, and they just need to learn to really put the most interesting part of their story up front as a hook. And so a lot of times,
Yeah, no, seriously. A hook is everything.
The thing that we really get to help people do is to help them arrange their stories in such a way where they get the visibility that they should have had and they deserved
Right.
all along, but they just didn't have that little bit of fairy dust to sprinkle on it to know how to arrange their stories correctly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everything should have like a compelling hook, nice backstory, maybe a sweet ending, maybe not so sweet ending. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on the flavor of, whoever you're trying to provide content for. I mean, you always got to look at the market.
Yeah.
And then like the community you're trying to reach too.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said there, I think that every good story has to have a dip in it. I think that that's a problem that a lot of agents have, is they're afraid of ever showing off, ever saying where they came from, or telling, their stories about, this is where I was when I started out, or this was a hard time.
Right.
I think a lot of times they're afraid to tell those stories because they're afraid of, diminishing their public profile. But if you look at every good story, every good narrative, every story that people want to watch, involves a hero or a character, who starts somewhere, descends into the darkness, goes through a time of struggle, and then comes out as the hero. And having that kind of a story frame and helping people tell their stories in that fashion is really the missing component a lot of times to helping them get the visibility they need, is sharing those lower points or sharing those darker times in their lives.
Well, classic Gregorian poet William Shakespeare, he made it very clear throughout his works that, to every comedy there's a tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's just a fact of life. Otherwise it wouldn't be there. But, you can balance those things and make them work to your advantage. It's just a matter of thinking about what the people might like and how you can show yourself in a different light to folks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at some of the biggest characters around in real estate, you can look at Ryan Serhant talks about how he was a failing hand model in New York and ended up, bluffing his way onto $1 million listing and now has one of the biggest brands in the world.
No way.
Absolutely.
I've never heard that story. Yeah, that's really cool.
You should look into it. He's got one of the biggest storytelling brands in the world now, and it all started out from a failing career as an actor and a hand model in New York. You can look at, I don't know if you guys have seen Glenda Baker.
I have, yeah.
Glenda Baker is huge in Atlanta.
I'm sure there's going to be awesome folks who need their story told. And Kasey, if they want to get a hold of you and get your help and you can show them the way, how can they reach you?
Yeah, so my biggest profile is on Instagram, is Kasey Greyy. Yeah, so my public-facing persona, or the best way to contact me is normally through Instagram. You can find me at Kasey Greyy. That's KASEY.GREYY on Instagram. I spend way too much time on social media, so if you ever want to talk, you ever want to chat, or have some questions, feel free to shoot me a DM over there. I'll probably answer alarmingly quickly.
Well, that's it for us at Living Near Athens, Georgia. And comment below who you might want to see next, and check out our details if you're looking for awesome representation.